Welcome to our quick start guide for marksmanship hunters in Mist of Pandaria. This video is going to cover everything that you need to know for setting up your character, which includes the best race, the best talents, glyphs, gear, professions, macros, and so much more. But first, let's talk about what's new and what to expect from your spec in PvP. Marks Hunter retains its identity as the bursty spec in this expansion, having a ton of on-demand damage coming from Chimera Shot. When combined with other bursty specs like Ret Paladins or even Rogues, Marks Hunters become the #1 enemy of any mage. Now, while there is a lot of overlap between the toolkits of each Hunter spec, what makes marksmanship stand out is Silencing Shot, which is both an interrupt and a 3-second blanket silence. This allows you to do some very cool things with cross CC. Now, Mop also introduces one of the strongest abilities ever for Hunters. No, it's not Stampede, it's a Murder of Crows. This is one of our main cooldowns, acting as a damage over time effect that can follow players out of LOS, taking away a key weakness that has plagued our spec since the dawn of PvP. But before we start with all that, this is just the first part in our Mist of Pandaria series. Our complete courses, including healing, damage, and playstyle guides, they are all available exclusively at skillcap.com. For the past few months, we've been working alongside the best and the most dedicated players ever in Mist of Pandaria. And right now, you can get ahead of 90% of players instantly thanks to our revamped courses, which teach you literally everything you need to know. And that's why we continue to offer a 400 rating gain guarantee across all of our games. So whether you want to experience Mop Classic or hop into retail, be sure to click the discount link below in order to get started. But for now, let's get back to the video. Alright, so it is time to make the very first decision before you even step foot into the game. Picking your race. Racials, they matter a lot in Classic, and Mop is no different. If you plan on playing Alliance, then Human is going to be the best, hands down, without question. In fact, for many DPS, this will be the best race in the entire game. Now, why is that? Well, that's thanks to the Will to Survive racial. Humans are able to wear 2 damage trinkets, which is a really big deal since trinket procs and effects represent a massive power spike. Now, you could also play Night Elf as Alliance to flex with Shadow Meld, but it's not something we would necessarily recommend, as the benefits from double damage trinkets are exceptionally good as a Marks Hunter. Now, if you want to play Horde, Orc is definitely going to be your best option here. Hardiness is arguably the best racial passive in the entire game, offering 15% stun reduction, which even stacks with similar effects. Not to mention Blood Fury, which is also a huge power spike as well, acting as a pseudo on-use trinket. But now let's talk about talents and glyphs, which both received an overhaul going into the expansion and are now much more streamlined. Now, for our first row of talents, we have 2 good options here. Narrow Escape has a practical use against melee, and Melee Cleaves as an AoE route. It can even be used to root healers at the same time, which makes it easier to land traps. Now, this talent is useful whenever you aren't the kill target or when you aren't limited by mobility. However, in games where your mobility is limited by roots, as is typically the case against mages, then Post Haste is also going to be a good option. This is going to give you more mobility by adding a root breaker and sprint effect to disengage. Now, we also have 2 options for the next row. Wyvern could be a Staff Lock right here, especially in 3v3, allowing you to sleep an enemy healer from range, sharing DR with Freezing Trap. However, one drawback here, though, is that the effect is a poison, and it can be removed by druids, monks, and paladins, and can be removed by Tremor Totem too. So if you're playing against a class with a poison dispel or against a shaman while you don't have a fear effect on your team, then we recommend playing Binding Shot. This can be used as a peel, or it can even be used to land traps in combination with Explosive Trap, but more on that later. Now, we also have options for our next set of talents too. Spirit Bond could be soft lock here, as it's great in most matchups, and especially good in 2v2 when you're playing without a healer, since it does ridiculous healing. However, if you're playing into a super bursty comp with stuns, with rogues, mages, or Windwalker monks, then you should play with Aspect of the Iron Hawk, as the 10% damage reduction is going to be more valuable. For our next row, we do have some flexibility. Thrill of the Hunt is the more passive option, as it simply gives us cheaper arcane shots periodically. Fervor might be more preferred for advanced players since it offers more utility. This gives us an instant boost to focus, which is very practical for quickly removing buffs with Tranquilizing Shot or simply having enough focus to Chimera Shot or Kill Shot when we need to quickly burst. Then for our next row, we're always going to pick a Murder of Crows. Now, as we mentioned earlier, this is our main damage cooldown, and it's going to give us a steady stream of unavoidable damage. And finally, for our last row, we're always going to use Glaive Toss. Now, we know that Power Shot might seem fun and all here, but Glaive Toss is going to give us more consistent damage throughout each and every game. Now, as far as glyphs are concerned, let's break things down into a few different categories for this part. We have 3 relatively hard-lock glyphs that we're going to play 90% of the time. Solace, which removes dots on targets that we scattershot or freezing trap, and essential for PvP. Explosive Trap, which gives us a knock effect, and do note that we can use this to trigger Binding Shot. And our third hardlock glyph is Animal Bond, which causes us to take more healing and essential when playing with a healer. Now, with that in mind, we do have some potential alternatives, including Master's Call, which we can play into melee cleaves whenever we don't need Solace. Camouflage, which we can play specifically in double DPS 2v2, which means we can drop Animal Bond. And finally, Black Ice, which is good whenever we're planning to train the enemy healer specifically in 2v2. Now, we also have 2 minor glyphs that actually matter here. They include Aspect of the Cheetah and Revive Pet. You do not want to PvP without these minor glyphs. But now it's time to move on to the exciting bit of this course, gearing your character. Now, luckily, there is absolutely no PvE involved here. First, though, let's talk about our stat priority, which will affect the pieces that we buy and how we gem and enchant them. Agility is by far and away the most important stat overall, as it's not only going to have a direct impact on all of your damage. Then we'll want to reach the 3% hit cap and the baseline 3% expertise soft cap. Now, as far as secondaries go, Critical Strike is going to be the best since we want the punchiest type of damage. Following this, our stats fall off a little bit, but we want Haste over Mastery here, which is our least valuable stat. Mob also introduces 2 new stats, PvP Resilience, which reduces damage taken from enemy players, and PvP Power, which increases healing and your damage done to other players. Both of these stats occur naturally on PvP gear and are the reason why all of your best in-slot gear is going to be from PvP. And while they are important, you really don't need to worry about them when gearing. Now, like most expansions, you're going to start by collecting full Honor gear while gradually farming Conquest gear every week to replace each slot with higher item level epics. Now, luckily, the stats on items offered in each slot are exactly the same. So with that in mind, let's break down our BIS lists. So to keep it easy, we're going to wear all 5 of our main set pieces. Then we're going to buy every off piece with Critical Strike on it. Just make sure you're buying the Proficiency neck piece to help reach the expertise cap, and one of your rings should be Accuracy to help reach the hit cap. Then for our weapon, we're going to choose either the gun or the bow. Now, it doesn't matter since they offer the same stats. And finally, for our trinkets, we're going to get the badge and insignia if we're human, but if we're orc, we're going to get the PvP medallion with Critical Strike and use the insignia trinket in our second slot. So luckily, enchants are pretty dang simple in MoB. For our weapon, we're going to use the Living Steel weapon chain against any team with a disarm effect, and this should be the first weapon enchant you buy. Now, as the season progresses, however, you should get a second weapon with Lord Blastington's Scope of Doom, which you can swap in against any non-disarm team. Then, for our high-ticket enchant, we're going to get the Greater Tiger Claw inscription on our shoulders, and then the Shadow Leather leg armor on our legs. Then, going through our minor enchants, unless we're a tailor, we're going to get Superior Critical Strike on our cloak, and no matter what, we're going to get Glorious Stats on our chest, and Greater Agility on our bracers. Then we're going to get Greater Haste on our gloves, and finally, Blurred Speed on our boots. Now, as far as gems are concerned, it's pretty simple here. Get as much agility as possible. To match sockets, we're going to use Delicate Primordial Rubies in red, Deadly Vermilion Onyx in yellow, and then either Glinting Imperial Amethyst or Assassin's Imperial Amethyst in blue, depending on whether or not we need hit. And don't forget here, you get an extra prismatic socket in your belt with the Living Steel belt buckle. You'll then need to decide what you want for your meta gem, and there are a few different routes you can take here. By default, we're going to go for the Agile Primal Diamond for a huge boost to our damage, but otherwise, if we want more consistent defensive bulk, we could get the powerful Primal Diamond for its 10% stun reduction, which is good against Windwalker monks, rogues, and even mages. So once you have everything geared and enchanted, be sure to head over to the Reforger to fine-tune your stats. We're going to aim to stick to our hit and expertise caps if needed here, and once we've hit our breakpoints, we're going to reforge into Critical Strike, prioritizing removing Mastery and Haste. Now, just like other classic expansions, professions do matter in Mist of Pandaria. As a DPS, there are two distinct routes you can take here, but no matter what, you should always get tailoring if possible. Tailoring offers a unique cloak enchant that can proc an extra 4,000 attack power for 15 seconds, which is absurdly strong as a DPS. Then, for your first route, you can choose Engineering for the Synapse Spring Glove enchant, which is an on-use effect that gives extra main stat for 10 seconds on a 1-minute cooldown. Now, we highly recommend this as a Marks Hunter since we want the highest on-demand burst damage. The other route is to go for raw stats, picking up any other non-gathering profession for a boost to our main stat. Now, do note that all professions offer the same static bonus to main stats, just avoid any gathering professions. Now, normally we would give you your macros here, but to make things even easier this season, we've got everything you need on our article site. There you can literally copy-paste each macro one by one instead of having to type them manually in-game. And finally, as a hunter, you are obviously going to need some pets here. You can only have 5 pets in your stable at a time, and your main pet should be a wolf since it gives us the highest damage thanks to its crit buff. However, if you already have a crit buff on your team from a mage, monk, or feral druid, then you have more options. A good general choice is going to be the hyena, which gives you and your team a 10% attack speed bonus, great for playing with other melee. However, if your team can benefit from haste here, then use a Spore Bat, which also has a mind-numbing poison debuff for your enemies. Finally, if your team is missing a mastery buff, you can use a cat. It's all about filling in extra stats that your team could benefit from. And if you want some additional utility against casters, you should keep a Nether Ray in your stables for its ranged kick. But before we go, you really don't want to miss this opportunity to get a massive head start on the competition with our 400 rating gain guarantee. Our courses and arena commentaries, they literally have everything you need to help you reach your goals. Regardless of how easy or how hard your class is to play, we've got you covered here. So head on over to skillcap.com and sign up today to start your journey to Gladiator.